Warning: if you ever thought you could run away from your past, this is the moment to prepare for a brutal truth. Before diving into this whirlwind of ambition and regret, give this video a like. Subscribe so you don't miss these real-life dramas, and comment gold if you believe wealth justifies everything. He amassed an incalculable fortune, built a real estate empire that challenged the very skyline of New York, and scaled the dizzying heights of power. But exactly 20 years ago, Julian Sterling made a ruthless and definitive decision. He abandoned his devoted wife for the cold and dazzling embrace of his boundless ambition. Decades passed, marked by excessive success and a silent, corrosive inner emptiness. And then, at a lavish charity gala at the Plaza Hotel, the past materialized before him. The woman he once discarded stood across from him, completely transformed, radiating a mature and unfamiliar beauty. But it was the handsome young man at her side, with eyes that were a chilling reflection of his own, that ignited a terrifying question threatening to collapse the foundations of his reality. Had he sold his soul not only for wealth, but also for the loss of a legacy he never knew existed? At the pinnacle of power and the root of oblivion, Julian Sterling found himself on the precipice of a monumental deal, the kind that transforms ordinary businessmen into true financial titans. The air in his opulent penthouse, located in a Manhattan financial district skyscraper, vibrated with untold possibilities. From his panoramic windows, the city lights twinkled like diamonds, scattered over a dark cloth, reflecting the vast wealth he had achieved. However, despite the dizzying heights of his success, a subtle, almost imperceptible pang of pain still resided deep within him, a persistent ghost of a life he had ruthlessly cut off. 20 years ago, Julian was not the imposing Julian Sterling, the real estate mogul. He was simply Julian, a struggling young entrepreneur married to Elena Vance. Their modest apartment in the working-class neighborhood of Queens was light years away from the gilded cage he now occupied. Elena was his lighthouse, his most loyal confidant, the constant flame that brought warmth to their humble home. She was the only one who believed in his vision when everyone else doubted, investing her meager savings into his first precarious ventures, working extra shifts as a kindergarten teacher to sustain his finances. Her laughter used to fill the small, simple kitchen. Her hands, soft but marked by years of care and work, were the ones that had dried his tears of frustration and held his hand in those rare moments of triumph. But ambition, that relentless torrent, can erode even the most solid foundation. As Julian's companies began to solidify, a new and dizzying world opened before him, a world of million-dollar negotiations, dazzling parties, and connections with the elite. In that new world, Elena, with her austere dresses and practical shoes, began to feel like an anchor, but in a different sense, more like a burden. He stopped seeing her as an unconditional companion and started seeing her as a relic of a past he needed to forget, a constant reminder of the poverty he had sworn to leave behind. The turning point came with the acquisition of an old industrial site on the Jersey City coast. It was a massive and dilapidated property, but Julian projected his vision of a luxury complex with world-class apartments and commercial spaces onto it. The deal required massive capital and, most importantly, a total commitment that would consume his life for years. Elena, who always kept her feet on the ground, expressed her concern. "Julian, are you sure? It's a huge risk. And what about us? What about starting the family we always wanted?" Her words, which once comforted him, now sounded like chains. Family, Elena. Do you know the meaning of this deal? This isn't just about the two of us anymore. This is a legacy. This is real wealth. His voice was icy, tinged with a resentment that surprised even him deeply. The breakup and the solitary rise. The arguments grew more intense, as was the norm during those months. He began spending more nights away, justifying it with strategic meetings, long workdays, and vital networking events. Elena, with her innate nobility, tried to understand, striving to bridge the growing chasm between them. She left warm dinners on the stove for him, sent him encouraging messages, and even visited his small, chaotic office with homemade sweets, hoping to revive the simple intimacy they once shared. However, every loving gesture felt to Julian like a subtle form of suffocation. The day he abandoned her, the atmosphere was heavy with an unspoken finality. There was no dramatic scene. He didn't cry or raise his voice. He simply prepared a small suitcase containing documents and some clothes, under the pretext of a long business trip. Elena stood there, motionless, at the bedroom doorway, her eyes silently pleading. "I need space, Elena," he told her, in a voice devoid of emotion. "This isn't working. I can't build an empire if I'm constantly tied down." He had expected an explosion, a desperate attempt to hold him back. Instead, Elena just nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I understand, Julian," she whispered in a voice almost inaudible. "I sincerely hope you find what you're looking for." That quiet acceptance, devoid of anger or reproach, caught him off guard and unsettled him more than any argument. He remembered the faint scent of her sweater as he passed her, the way the morning light highlighted a few silver strands in her dark hair. He didn't dare look back. He stepped into the taxi waiting at the curb, leaving behind not just a wife, but a fundamental part of himself that he would spend the next 2 decades trying to bury under the weight of success. He never called her. He never wrote to her. His lawyers handled the divorce papers, a cold exchange of legal documents that severed their bond like a surgical blade. Elena demanded absolutely nothing, not a cent of the modest assets they owned. Her only request was to reclaim her maiden name, Vance. Julian signed the papers indifferently, already absorbed by the blueprints of his growing empire. Pause for reflection. If you were Elena, knowing Julian's character, would you have demanded more in the divorce? Or was her silence an act of superior dignity? Share your opinion in the comments. Elena Vance disappeared from his life as completely as a dream vanishes upon waking. In the years to come, Julian Sterling transformed Sterling Global Holdings into a colossal force. Skyscrapers across the country bore his name. His face appeared on the covers of business magazines. He lived surrounded by private jets, exclusive clubs, and a continuous stream of beautiful and ambitious women who understood his rules. No emotional complications, no commitments, only fleeting companionship. He amassed art collections. He bought vineyards and luxury cars he rarely used. He became the embodiment of power, a testament to his ruthless determination. However, despite his relentless pursuit of more, the emptiness persisted. It was a subtle, insidious loneliness, hidden behind champagne toasts and the roar of the stock market. Sometimes, in the dead hours of the night, when the city was silent and the penthouse felt immensely large and empty, the echo of Elena's soft laughter would return, a ghostly melody he couldn't entirely silence. He convinced himself he had made the right decision, that Elena was a distraction. Success, he told himself, requires sacrifice. He had sacrificed Elena, and now he was a king. But the king usually dined in solitude, surrounded by spoils that felt increasingly hollow. Elena's metamorphosis and the new companion. While Julian rose in power, Elena, for her part, faced a very different reality. Being abandoned had ruined her, leaving her adrift in the quiet apartment that suddenly felt vast and empty. The initial shock gave way to profound pain, not only for the loss of a husband, but for the destruction of a shared dream. But Elena Vance was not the type to sit and wail. She possessed an inner strength that Julian had never truly appreciated, a resilience born of quiet determination. Her schoolwork became her lifeline. The innocent laughter of children became the medicine to soothe her wounded soul. She took on extra tutoring jobs, saving every penny. She moved to a smaller, charming apartment that still held memories, but less painful ones. She enrolled in night classes, pursuing an old passion for graphic design. Her talent, once dormant, blossomed in the fertile ground of her newfound independence. Slowly, with effort, Elena began to rebuild her emotional life. Brick by brick, she learned to stand on her own 2 feet, to prosper not in spite of Julian's abandonment, but because of the freedom that, paradoxically, he had provided. The quiet and gentle woman Julian left behind was undergoing a metamorphosis, becoming hardened in some ways, but flourishing in others. She shed the old skin of dependency, emerging stronger, more self-assured, and with a serene confidence that shone beneath her still delicate exterior. The emptiness Julian felt was the very space Elena had filled with renewed purpose and self-discovery. Her freelance design firm, Vance Design Studios, grew steadily. She moved beyond local flyers and small websites, attracting clients from emerging tech startups and high-end fashion boutiques. Her unique aesthetic, clean, elegant, and infused with a subtle warmth, set her apart. She found a small, sun-drenched studio in an artistic enclave in Brooklyn, a place where the scent of coffee and creativity mingled in the air. Her days passed immersed in work. Her nights were filled with book clubs, gallery openings, and intimate dinners with a close circle of friends, people who valued authenticity over ostentation. Elena also nurtured other passions. She began making pottery, finding meditative calm in shaping clay with her hands. She volunteered at a local animal shelter. Her quiet compassion was a comfort to abandoned creatures. Her life was filled with purpose, creativity, and genuine human connection. She found joy in simple things, a perfect cup of tea, the vibrant color of an autumn leaf, the satisfaction of completing a challenging design project. She was happy, truly happy, a state Julian had long forgotten, or perhaps never knew. However, one of the most important changes in Elena's life came quietly and unexpectedly. While redesigning the website for a non-profit dedicated to fostering young artistic talent, she met Dr. David Brooks. David was a brilliant art historian with a gentle voice, serving on the organization's board. Their initial interactions were purely professional, but soon, shared passions for art, literature, and quiet nights discussing ideas began to weave a different tapestry. David was everything Julian was not: patient, kind, deeply empathetic, and completely uninterested in material wealth beyond a comfortable life. He saw Elena, he truly saw her, beyond her past, beyond her talent. He saw the resilience in her eyes, the warmth of her smile, the depth of her soul. Their relationship developed slowly and deliberately, in stark contrast to the fleeting affairs Julian engaged in. David was a constant and reassuring presence, a gentle hand, a listening ear. He brought calm and stability to Elena's life, a sense of companionship she hadn't realized she still craved. After 5 years of quiet companionship, they married in a small, moving ceremony at a botanical garden, surrounded by their closest friends. Elena Vance became Elena Vance Brooks, and with that union, a new chapter firmly rooted in love and stability began. Regarding the clash at the plaza, Julian, completely unaware of these developments, continued his relentless march. He was constantly in the news, acquiring controlling stakes in major tech firms, launching luxury hotels in Dubai, and even venturing into space tourism. His net worth soared into the tens of billions. He had reached the ultimate peak of success. However, the persistent emptiness remained a muffled heartbeat beneath the roar of his achievements. Sometimes he wondered about Elena, not with regret, but with a distant curiosity. Was she happy? Had she married? He imagined her settled into a quiet, provincial life, perhaps still teaching kindergarten, living a simple existence, far from the dazzling heights he had climbed. That thought, he told himself, confirmed his choice. He had risen high, while she, he assumed, had simply endured. He couldn't have been more wrong. Destiny, however, has a strange way of arranging meetings, of reweaving forgotten threads into the tapestry of life. Julian, despite all his power, was just a pawn in this grand design. The stage was set for a confrontation, a clash between past and present that would shatter his carefully built world and force him to face the ghost of the woman he abandoned and the life he never knew. Sterling Global Holdings' annual charity gala was not just an event. It was tangible proof of Julian's personal kingdom, a dazzling microcosm of his dominance over the financial world. That night, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York glittered with thousands of faces of the American elite. Julian, perfectly dressed in a custom midnight blue tuxedo, was the undisputed king. He moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a seasoned diplomat, a charming, almost effortless smile on his lips. However, his eyes remained razor sharp, assessing every greeting, every compliment, and every fleeting glance for opportunities or threats. He was immersed in a polite, if tedious, exchange with Senator Carmen Navarro, a powerful figure in New York politics. They were discussing the complexities of upcoming corporate tax reforms, a conversation that usually demanded his full and unwavering attention. However, while the senator was rambling on about legislative amendments, Julian's gaze, usually so focused, distractedly drifted around the crowded room. And then his eyes were caught by something. Beside the large marble fireplace where a group of guests had gathered, a woman was standing. She was talking animatedly, her head slightly tilted, and her laughter, clear and melodic, wove its way distinctly through the polished din of the ballroom. The sound itself was like a forgotten string vibrating deep within him, a faint, haunting echo of a distant past he had carefully and neatly compartmentalized. It was a unique timbre, instantly recognizable to a part of his mind he believed to be dead. He frowned, a small crease forming between his eyebrows. He dismissed it immediately. A trick of the acoustics, perhaps? He rarely, almost never, thought of her, and certainly not here, among the glittering faces of his meticulously curated present life. The idea that Elena Vance, the quiet kindergarten teacher from Queens, could inhabit this lavish space was absurd. However, a subtle and persistent attraction, an almost primal curiosity, forced him to look closer, to truly register the figure beside the fireplace. The woman turned, slightly shifting her body's center, and for the first time, her profile was fully revealed. Her hair, no longer just a simple dark tone, was now a glossy chestnut brown, styled in soft, elegant waves, framing a face that had matured with extraordinary grace. Laugh lines, not worry lines, were etched around her eyes, and her smile, as she answered something from another guest, was radiant, overflowing with genuine warmth and an inner serenity that struck him with profound force. It was undeniably her, Elena Vance. His breath caught in his throat. He felt a sudden, disorienting tear, as if the solid marble floor beneath him had dropped several feet. This was not the Elena he remembered, the quiet, slightly faded woman he had abandoned, and who, in his arrogant estimation, he assumed had withered in his absence. This Elena radiated an aura of calm confidence, a sophisticated elegance that went beyond mere beauty, shining from within rather than being put on. She wore a deep emerald green evening gown, a tone that highlighted the warmth of her skin and sparkled subtly under the crystal chandeliers. A tight, cold knot formed in his stomach. How? Who had invited her to this exclusive circle, to his charity gala? His mind raced, desperately trying to reconcile the faded, almost ghostly Elena of his memory with the vibrant, self-controlled woman before him. The dissonance was jarring, threatening to unravel the carefully built narrative of his past. He was about to abruptly apologize to Senator Navarro, his composure rapidly disintegrating, when another figure stepped into view, capturing his attention with a jolt that felt visceral and nauseating. Standing beside Elena, his hand placed naturally and intimately on her lower back as she laughed, was a young man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a confident yet approachable demeanor that spoke of quiet strength and inner poise. And then Julian saw his face. A lock of dark hair, perhaps styled a bit more loosely, but undeniably the same deep, dark tone as his own. A strong, sharp jawline, eerily similar to his own jaw. But it was the eyes that truly froze him. Deep, intelligent eyes, a distinctive hazel-brown tone that had always been Julian's most talked-about feature, inherited directly from his paternal line. The young man's gaze met Elena's, and a tender, intimate smile, full of mutual affection, passed between them. A silent communication of deep connection. The world seemed to tilt violently on its axis, and the polished hum of the gala faded into a distant, muffled murmur. Julian felt a cold terror seep into his marrow, a premonition so powerful and terrifying it stole the air from his lungs. This young man looked so much like him, but not like Julian at his current age, with the lines of stress and cynicism etched around his eyes and mouth. He looked like Julian of 25 years ago, before ambition burned him up, before the relentless pursuit of wealth hardened his features. He looked like the son Julian had once vaguely dreamed of, a pain for a lost limb in his heart that he hadn't realized still existed. He muttered a hurried, incoherent apology to Senator Navarro, who looked at him with slight surprise, and he staggered away from the conversation. His eyes remained glued, almost hypnotized, on Elena and the young man. He needed answers. He needed to know with a desperate and devastating urgency. He moved through the crowd, pushing past bewildered guests. A single desperate question echoed like a death knell in his mind. Who is he? Just then, he saw another figure approaching the pair. It was Elena's husband, David Brooks, a distinguished-looking man, slightly older than Elena, with an air of quiet academic authority, kind eyes, and a gentle smile that seemed to radiate true warmth. David placed a reassuring hand on Elena's arm, and she turned toward him, her face lighting up with an expression of deep affection and contentment that Julian had never fully witnessed during his own marriage. A wave of unexpected, sharp, powerful, and completely humiliating jealousy washed over Julian. This was her husband. This was the man who had given her the life she was living now, the happiness Julian had denied her, the stability he had mocked. He stood frozen, watching as David Brooks embraced the young man, a familiar gesture of father-son warmth. The young man, in turn, also embraced David, with genuine affection and respect evident in the action. They were a family, a loving and complete unit. A family Julian was not a part of. A family where a young man who looked strikingly like him was a beloved and indispensable member. He needed to get closer, to hear their names, to somehow confirm or deny this terrifying and increasingly likely suspicion. He pretended to circle toward a nearby bar, his movements stiff and unnatural, as he navigated the edge of the group, pretending to admire a large and vibrant abstract painting. He strained his ears to listen. He heard Elena's voice, clear and warm, ringing with a comfortable familiarity. "David, darling, I was just telling Adrian about the new sustainable architecture project. He's so excited to contribute." Adrian. The name solidified the image, striking him with the power of a physical impact. He caught the attention of an old partner, Mr. Harrison Davis, a PR expert known for his encyclopedic knowledge of New York society. Davis, noticing Julian's unusually rigid posture, heavily approached. "Julian, old friend, a wonderful gala as usual. The senator was telling me about your latest philanthropic work." Julian forced a calm tone, his heart thumping against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Harrison, great to see you. Hey, who is that graceful woman by the fireplace with the gentleman and that young man? They seem quite prominent, but I can't recall them." He tried to make it sound like idle, passing curiosity. Harrison looked through his half-moon glasses, eyes sparkling. "Ah, Elena Vance Brooks. A truly remarkable woman, Julian. Elegant, sharp, and with a great eye. She runs a very successful design firm, Vance Design Studios, you know. She's made a name for herself in sustainable design. And that's her husband, Dr. David Brooks, a famous art historian from Columbia University. They are both very philanthropic, completely dedicated to community arts. People of great value." Harrison paused, and then pointed to Adrian. "And the young man? That's their son, Adrian Brooks. He just graduated with honors from New York Polytechnic University. A smart young man heading into sustainable architecture, following in his stepfather's footsteps, with a passion for heritage and the built environment. But with a modern style, of course. He is her son." Son. That word struck into Julian like a physical impact, a shockwave echoing through his entire being. Her son. Adrian Brooks. But he was too much like him. His mind spun wildly, trying to piece together a fragmented timeline. He remembered their shared dream of having children. A cold, horrifying reality began to emerge. A brutal truth so devastating it threatened to break the carefully constructed identity he had built. What if Adrian was not David Brooks' biological son? What if Adrian was his son? A son he had abandoned without even knowing it, along with his wife and their shared future. The thought was unbearable, a tearing and nauseating pain in his chest. This was a loss he couldn't soothe with a clever takeover or a hostile bid. Julian muttered another vague apology to Harrison, his voice barely a whisper, and withdrew, seeking temporary relief in the men's restroom. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to clear the fog of disbelief and terror. He had to know. He had to approach Adrian, study his features, search for definitive proof, somehow confirm or deny this heart-wrenching suspicion that had taken root in his very soul. He went back to the ballroom, now moving with a predatory and desperate focus. He passed Elena and David, pretending to turn toward the bar. As he passed, he caught a fragment of Adrian's voice, clear, confident, and full of youthful energy. "Mom, Dad, I'm going to get a drink. Do you guys need anything?" The natural affection in Adrian's voice, the way he naturally included both Elena and David, was like a knife twisting in an open wound. This was their family. This was the life Julian had rejected, the warmth and connection he had traded for cold, sparkling success. He went to the bar. He ordered a neat whiskey, the pure liquid burning its way down his throat. He needed a plan. He couldn't simply approach Elena after 2 decades, not with this brutal secret floating between them. But he couldn't leave either, not with this lingering, terrifying question, this possibility that was consuming him. He remembered a specific mark right under his left earlobe, a tiny dark mole he had inherited from his own father, a genetic signature passed down through generations. It was a minor detail, insignificant in the large scheme of things. But in his current state of desperate certainty, it seemed the undeniable key to unlocking this painful mystery. He had to see Adrian very close without being observed. To find that mark, he spent the rest of the night stalking, watching, his gaze constantly returning to Adrian. He watched him move through the gala, participating in conversations with a natural charm and intelligence that denied his youth. He saw Elena laugh, her eyes sparkling, truly happy. He saw David Brooks looking at her with an expression of deep adoration, a quiet, solid love that spoke with more power than any grand gesture. And he saw Adrian, gestures, mannerisms, a confident Fong thigh, uncomfortably similar, echoing Julian's own movements from a lifetime ago. The thought that this vibrant, smart, well-adjusted young man could be his son, a son he never knew, never nurtured, never even acknowledged, was a tormenting, suffocating weight in his chest. As the gala began to wind down slowly and gracefully, Julian saw Adrian heading toward the cloakroom, perhaps preparing to leave. This was his chance. It was now or never. He moved quickly, steps urgent, almost tripping in his haste, intercepting the young man just as he reached the counter. "Excuse me," Julian said, his voice surprisingly steady, almost devoid of the trembling he felt inside. "You're Adrian, right? I'm Julian Sterling. I think I know your mother, Elena." He tried to sound casual, interested, as if the mogul was simply making an acquaintance. Adrian turned, his hazel brown eyes strikingly similar to Julian's, opening slightly in polite surprise. "Mr. Sterling," he said, reaching out a steady and polite hand. The handshake was firm, strong, a mirror of Julian himself. "Yes, Adrian Brooks. Very glad to meet you. My mother speaks very highly of the philanthropic work of the foundation you established." Julian forced a smile, graceful and practiced, feeling like a predator in sheep's clothing. "The pleasure is all mine, Adrian," he replied, his voice a bit hoarse, almost uncontrollable. "Your mother?" "Yes. Elena and I met many, many years ago. It's truly wonderful to see her doing so phenomenally well. Clearly, you've grown into a remarkable young man." Harrison mentioned you just graduated in sustainable architecture from the Polytechnic University. As Adrian spoke, detailing his studies, his aspirations, his passion for environmentally conscious design, his youthful enthusiasm was contagious, and Julian found himself listening with desperate intensity, not to the words, but to the subtle movements of Adrian's head, the angle of his face. He leaned in subtly, getting a little closer, trying to get a clear, unobstructed look at Adrian's left earlobe. His heart thundered in his chest, a frantic drum against his ribs. The noise of the ballroom faded again, replaced by the deafening sound of his own pulse. It was there, a small, dark mole, positioned precisely right under the earlobe, exactly like Julian's own, exactly where his father's used to be. The same size, the same tone, the same subtle curve of the skin around it. The world went silent, and then exploded. All the sounds of the crowded gala, the polite conversations, the distant music, all faded into an incomprehensible, meaningless hum. All Julian could see, all he could focus on, was that small, ordinary mark, a silent, irrefutable proof. Adrian Brooks wasn't just a young man who looked like him. Adrian Brooks was his son. His son. A son he had abandoned without even knowing it, along with the woman who was once the peaceful and enduring center of his life. A wave of cold and acidic nausea washed over him, followed by a deep, devastating regret. So great, it made him collapse from within. 20 years. 20 years of a life he never knew, of a bond he never created, of a family he had willingly and ruthlessly discarded to pursue hollow power. He had chosen money, isolated power, and the illusion of success instead of a life that had clearly blossomed into something beautiful and complete without him. The bitter irony of it all was a cruel, painful twist of the knife through his carefully built defenses. He tried to stammer out a few more strained trivialities. His mind spun, his words sounding strange in his own mouth. He ended the conversation abruptly, his urgency almost impossible to hide. He shook Adrian's hand again, grip tight, almost desperate, clinging to this fleeting, unbearable connection. "It was truly a pleasure, Adrian," he said. His voice was hoarse, almost just a whisper. "A great, great pleasure." He walked away, leaving a slightly confused Adrian Brooks behind, and sank back into the swirling anonymity of the withdrawing crowd, only seeking to escape. The city lights, once a symbol of his victory, of his infinite reach, now seemed to mock him, their dazzling brightness illuminating the lonely, empty landscape he himself had created. The ghost of Elena, the woman he had abandoned, had returned, not as a faded memory, but as a vibrant, undeniable reality, holding the hand of a son he never knew he had. His carefully built world, his lonely empire, had just begun to collapse around him, leaving him adrift in a sea of belated and overwhelming regret. This is Elena's confrontation and peace, the revelation of Adrian's identity. His son, the one he had abandoned without knowing, pushed Julian Sterling into a downward spiral. The meticulous order of his life, built on calculated risks and cold ambition, shattered. He locked himself in his penthouse, canceled meetings, ignored calls. The image of Adrian's face, a younger and purer version of his own, haunted his waking hours and seeped into his restless sleep. He was tormented by questions. How? When? Why had Elena never told him? Finally, he called Harrison again, voice tense. "Harrison, I need a deep investigation. Elena Vance Brooks. Everything. Her past, her business, her family, her son, with maximum discretion. A few days later, a comprehensive dossier landed on Julian's desk. He devoured it. Every page, a new wound. Elena's design firm was indeed a great success, specializing in sustainable branding for eco-conscious businesses, very different from his own predatory real estate activities. Her marriage to David Brooks was proof of stability and mutual respect. And then, there it was, a detailed timeline of Adrian's birth. Adrian was born 6 months after their divorce ended. Elena had been pregnant when he left, pregnant with their child. The truth struck him with the power of a physical impact. He hadn't just abandoned his wife, he had abandoned his unborn child. Elena's quiet acceptance, her whisper, "I hope you find what you're looking for," now rang with heart-wrenching clarity. She had known. She had carried the secret, their child, alone, and had built a beautiful life without him. The depth of her strength and the unforgivable magnitude of his own cruelty overwhelmed him. He needed to see her. He needed to apologize, to explain, even though he knew no explanation would be enough. He found the studio address in the dossier, a charming, sun-filled space in Brooklyn. He drove there, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart beating like a drum against his ribs. Elena was at her desk, engrossed with a design project. When he walked in, the soft jingle of the bell above the door made her look up. Her eyes, still hazel brown, but now with a steel glint he had never seen before, opened in disbelief. "Julian," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "What are you doing here?" He stood awkwardly, dwarfed by the vibrant artwork on the walls, feeling like an intruder in a sanctuary. "Elena," he began, voice hoarse, "I saw you at the gala, and Adrian—" A flash of understanding, quickly covered, crossed her face. "Adrian is my son," she stated, her tone a clear warning. "He is also my son, isn't he?" Julian blurted out. "He looks exactly like it. He has that mole. I know it." Elena stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then a sigh escaped her lips, heavy with years of unspoken history. "Yes, Julian," she said softly. "He is your son. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide it from me?" "Hide it from you." Elena's voice, though still gentle, now vibrated with barely contained anger. "Julian, you left. You walked out that door without looking back. You cut me out of your life completely. You thought I was a burden, a barrier to your ambition. What was I supposed to do? Chase you? Beg you to acknowledge a child you clearly didn't want when you couldn't even acknowledge me?" Her words were precise, each one a perfectly aimed dart. He shrank back. "I didn't know you were pregnant. You wouldn't have cared anyway, Julian. You were obsessed with your empire. A baby would have been just another distraction. You weren't ready to be a father. You weren't ready to be a husband. You weren't ready to be a man. Besides, David is his father. He raised him. He loved him. He taught him everything. He has been the father Adrian deserves, the one you could never be." "I want to explain," Julian pleaded. "I want to fix it. I want to get to know him, my son." Elena laughed mockingly, a bitter sound. "After 20 years, after he has grown into a remarkable young man, thanks to David's love and guidance, you think you can just step back into his life and claim him? You gave up that right the day you left." "Please, Elena," he begged with a broken voice. "I've made so many mistakes. I regret it every day. My life is empty. All this," he gestured vaguely to his vast invisible empire, "it means nothing without family. without him. Elena looked at him then, a long, appraising look that seemed to strip away all his carefully built defenses. Empty, Julian. Is that why you finally come? Not for Adrian, but for yourself, because your great empire doesn't fill the void you created. Her voice was tinged with a bone-chilling disappointment. That seems to be your problem, not ours. No, he insisted, desperation coloring his tone. No, it's not just about me. I see what kind of man Adrian is. He's everything I wish I could have been. He's kind, smart, passionate, and he's my son. I deserve to know him. He deserves to know his biological father, even if it's a flawed man like me. Elena sighed again, running a hand through her hair. Adrian knows, she said, surprising him. He always knew. We never hid it. David and I told him the truth when he was old enough, gently and carefully. We told him about the biological father, who left before he was born. We also made sure he knew how much he was loved by the father who chose to raise him. Julian felt a new wave of agony. Adrian knew, and yet still embraced David as his father. The rejection, though not spoken by Adrian, was tangible. I need to talk to him, Julian said, his voice barely a whisper. Just once, to apologize, to explain, to thank you, Elena, for raising him to be the man he is today. Elena looked at him. Her expression softened, almost unnoticeably. I can't promise anything, Julian. Adrian is an adult. It's his decision. But I'll talk to David. Then I'll talk to Adrian. Don't expect a miracle, and don't expect him to accept you into his life overnight, if he ever does. He nodded with a deep sense of gratitude, mixed with his persistent desperation. Thank you, Elena. That's all I can ask. He walked out of her studio, the weight of the world on his shoulders, but with a sliver of hope, fragile as a spider's web. The final encounter and the return of the soul. He spent the next days in agonizing anticipation, waiting for a call that might never come. A week later, his phone rang. It was Elena. Adrian will meet you, she said, voice still neutral. At a neutral place, chosen by me. This Friday, at 6 in the evening, at Café Verde on Olmo Street. Just you and him. No expectations, Julian. Café Verde was a quaint and unpretentious place, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and quiet conversation. Julian arrived early, heart thumping. Adrian was already there, sitting at a corner table, drinking tea. He looked up as Julian approached, his gaze steady and unwavering. Adrian, Julian said, taking the seat opposite him. Mr. Sterling, Adrian replied, tone polite but distant. Please, call me Julian. He paused, gathering courage. Adrian, I know you know. About me, about our connection. Adrian nodded slowly. My mother and David told me when I was about 10. They were very open. They said you were a man who made difficult decisions, and those decisions meant you wouldn't be in our lives. Those words were calm, without any anger, but imbued with a silent dignity that was devastating. I made a terrible mistake, Adrian, Julian began, voice thick with emotion. I was young, foolish, blinded by ambition. I didn't see what I had in Elena. I didn't see you. Didn't see you. I wish I could go back and change it, but I can't. All I can do is apologize. From the bottom of my heart, I am deeply and truly sorry for abandoning you, for not being there, for not being the father you deserved. He looked directly into Adrian's eyes, trying to convey the greatness of his regret. Adrian listened, expression unreadable. "I've had a wonderful father in David," he finally said, voice soft but firm. "He taught me everything important. He was there for every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak. He is my father, and my mother is the strongest and most incredible woman I know. They built a life together, a beautiful life, and I am so grateful to be part of it." "I know," Julian whispered, a bitter taste in his mouth. "And I see it, and I thank them for it, for giving you such a wonderful life, for raising you to be you." A long silence stretched between them, interrupted by the clinking of coffee cups. Julian felt tears sting his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in decades. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Adrian," Julian continued, "or accept me into your life. But I wanted you to hear it directly from me. The regret is infinite, the loss unbearable. You are a truly exceptional young man, and seeing you, knowing you, has made me realize the true cost of what I pursued." Adrian finally looked at him, a faint, almost unnoticeable change in his expression. "I don't hate you, Julian," he said, voice low. "I understand that people make mistakes, big mistakes. My life has been good. I'm happy. I have a family that loves me unconditionally." He paused. "And though I appreciate your apology and your honesty, I don't think I have room for another father in my life right now. The one I have is enough." Those words, spoken without malice, but with unwavering certainty, were the final blow. Devastating. Julian had hoped for a crack, a small opening, but Adrian's boundaries were clear, his loyalty unwavering. "I understand," Julian said, defeat weighing in his voice. "Thank you for meeting me, Adrian. Truly, this means a lot." As he stood up to go, Adrian reached across the table, picked up a small hand-painted ceramic coaster, a piece of pottery, and pushed it gently toward Julian. "My mother made this," Adrian said. "She's an incredible artist. It's a reminder that beauty can come from unexpected places, even from broken pieces." Julian took the coaster, fingers tracing the delicate pattern. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes. Elena forging beauty from the fragments of her shattered past. He looked at Adrian one last time, his son, a reflection of both his greatest regret and the enduring power of a love he had abandoned. As Julian left Cafe Verde, the setting sun cast long shadows over Olmo Street. The empire he built seemed less impressive, less, substantial. Real wealth, he realized, was not measured in billions, but in shared laughter, quiet moments of connection, love nurtured and returned. He had spent his life chasing shadows, only to discover too late that true light had always been just beyond his reach, in the life he had discarded. He had found his son. Yes, but the bitter irony was that he only found him to recognize the deep and unbridgeable abyss he himself had created. The mogul who abandoned his wife had seen her with a young man who looked like him, and in that agonizing recognition, finally saw the total and devastating cost of his choices. He was left with an empire and an unbearable emptiness, a king truly alone on his throne. Reflection and farewell. Reflection and farewell. This story is a heartbreaking journey that reveals the deep cost of unchecked ambition and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Julian Sterling's story is a crude reminder that true wealth is not always measured in euros, but in the bonds we forge and the love we cultivate. Elena's quiet strength and Adrian's unwavering loyalty show us that new beginnings can truly bloom in the most unexpected places. If this story moved you, stirred your emotions, or made you reflect on your own life choices, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a powerful reminder of what truly matters. And subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas exploring the depths of the human experience. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you do if you were Julian? How would you try to mend the past? Leave your ideas in the comments.